There are some players in football who just confuse the life out of me. Players where you look at them and think, this guy has everything. The technique, the pace, the movement, and yet something's just not clicking the way it should. Ferran Torres is one of those players. Honestly, if you've been following his career over the past few years, you're probably asking the same thing I've been asking. That being, what is actually going on with him? This is a player who burst onto the scene at Valencia, made a big money move to City, got picked up by Barcelona and has played for the Spanish national team. And yet, despite all that, you get the sense that nobody can quite figure out what he actually is. Is he a winger? Is he a striker? Is he a super sub? A starter? Is he an unfinished product or a player who's already hit his ceiling? Let's break this down. From the early promise to the big moves, to the hot and cold form, and try to figure out what's going on with Ferran Torres. Ferran Torres is one of those academy products that Valencia fans were absolutely buzzing about. He wasn't just another player to come through the ranks, he was the guy. You can see it from a young age, quick feet, sharp acceleration, and this is key, that typical Spanish elegance. At Valencia, Ferran started getting first team minutes super early. He debuted at just 17 years old. You could tell the club rated him because they threw him into these big games really quickly. And for the most part, he didn't look out of place. But even back then, there was always this lingering question. What's his best position? He's often played as a right winger, cutting inside onto his stronger right foot, which is a bit unconventional because modern wingers tend to be inverted, but he had this ability to drive forward, whipping crosses and link up play. By the end of the 1920 season, it was clear Ferran had outgrown Valencia. He was one of those few bright sparks in the club that was slowly falling into chaos behind the scenes. Contract disputes, boardroom issues, and financial problems meant that Valencia were losing their star players. And Ferran wasn't going to be an exception to this. In 2020, Ferran made the jump to Man City for what, in hindsight, was a ridiculously cheap, around 23 million euro. At the time, that felt like a bit of a bargain for a Spanish international. Now here's where things start to get a bit weird. Pep Guardiola clearly saw something in Ferran that a lot of people didn't fully expect. Almost immediately, Pep stopped using him as a traditional winger and started experimenting with him as a false nine. Yep, a false nine, in a team where you had no traditional strikers at the time. Aguero was injured most of the season, and Jesus was never fully convinced as the main man. And to be fair, it kinda worked, for a while. Ferran had this ability to make clever runs into the box. He's very good at ghosting into dangerous spaces, without defenders picking him up. His finishing was solid, not spectacular, but reliable. During the 2021 season, he scored 13 goals in all competitions. Not bad for someone adjusting to a new country, a new role, and Pep's famously complex system. But, and there's always a but, Ferran never really nailed down a guaranteed starting spot. In fairness, almost nobody does at City. The rotation, the tactical tweaks, the constant competition for places, it felt like Ferran was floating between being a useful squad player and a guy who never had Pep fully convinced. Then came the injury. A metatarsal fracture in October 2021 while playing for Spain, out for months, and by the time he was fit again, there was growing noise that he wanted to move. Then in January of 2022, Ferran Torres signed for Barça. The fee? Around 55 million euro plus add-ons. A big chunk of change for a club that, let's be honest, was and still kinda is financially underwater. Now here's the thing, Barcelona's transfer strategy during this period was all over the place. On the one hand, they were desperately trying to rebuild without money. On the other hand, they were throwing significant fees at players like Ferran. Think of it, Ferran, Rafinha, Lewandowski, while also juggling free transfers like Aubameyang and Kessie. So was Ferran a carefully thought out signing for Xavi's system? Or was he more of, we need someone young, Spanish and versatile who won't reject us kind of sign? Honestly, it feels like a bit of both. At first it looked promising. Ferran brought energy. His movement was clever, he was linking well with Pedri and Xavi. He was doing all the right things, except, and this is crucial, scoring consistently. His finishing became a genuine talking point. For every well-taken goal, there was 2 or 3 glaring misses, sitters, clear chances where you'd be screaming at the telly, thinking, how has he not buried that? I think the core problem with Ferran Torres, and this is true whether you ask fans of Valencia, Barcelona or City like myself, is that nobody can confidently tell you where his best position is. Is he a winger? He's quick, he's not blisteringly quick, but he can dribble. But he's not a pure take-on merchant like Vinny. Is he a striker? He makes intelligent runs, but he lacks the physicality to hold up play like a traditional number 9. And then is he a false 9? Maybe, but that works best in systems like Pep's with heavy possession. At Barcelona, Xavi has used him everywhere. Left wing, right wing, through the middle, and to Ferran's credit, he's a willing worker. He presses hard, he tracks back, he's tactically disciplined. Coaches love players like that. But fans want end product, goals, assists. And that's where Ferran has struggled to win people over. Statistically, Ferran is one of the players where if you just glance at the numbers, you might be fooled into thinking he's doing okay. For example, during the 22-23 season, he managed 7 goals and 3 assists in La Liga. Decent, not amazing. And then in the Champions League, he chipped in with some goals in the group stages. But like, I suppose I don't want to compare, but when you do compare it to someone like, Rafinha, Ansu Fati when he's fit, or even Dembele, Ferran's output often looked underwhelming. And it's not for lack of chances. His XG stats have been consistently high relative to his minutes. He gets into good positions, but doesn't convert nearly as often as he should. The joke about him being the Spanish Timo Werner started circulating online, which, while harsh, isn't entirely baseless. One thing that's become painfully obvious is that Ferran is a confidence player. When things aren't going well, you can see it. He plays with freedom, tries risky passes, shoots on sight, but when things dip, and they dip often, he becomes hesitant. He overthinks. He takes an extra touch or two, or opts for the safe pass instead of pulling the trigger. This is the double-edged sword of being a technically gifted player. He isn't quite world class at any one thing. When the confidence is gone, the flaws become glaringly obvious. Here's something that I find really curious in a way. Ferran seems to play with more freedom and productivity for Spain under Luis Enrique. He was often used as the main forward, and his goal record was surprisingly solid. He scored 17 goals in his first 35 caps for Spain. Not bad at all. So why does it seem to click more for Spain? Well, here's a few reasons. The system plays to his strengths. It's very possession based, lots of short intricate passes, and a focus on movement over physicality. There's less pressure to be the star, since the Spanish setup is more about the actual team and a collective. And then also, international football is generally a bit slower paced, which suits his style. But even that has started to fade recently, as younger talents emerge. Nico Williams, Lamine Yamal, Brian Zaragoza. Ferran's place in the national team is no longer guaranteed. So what does the future look like for Ferran? This is the $1 million question. Ferran is still only 24. In theory, he's nowhere near his prime yet. But here's the reality check. Football moves fast. If you don't stake your claim early, clubs move on. At Barca, the competition's intense. You've got Yamal breaking through, a generational talent. Rafinha, he's had a killer season, he's there too. Felix has been thrown into the mix. Lewandowski is still holding down the striker spot. Plus, Barcelona are always sniffing around for shiny new attackers. There are rumours about Barca potentially selling Ferran to balance the books. Now, move-wise, I'm not sure where. I think maybe a mid-tier Premier League club, or maybe even a top Serie A side actually be the best thing for him. He could be the main man again, rather than a rotational player. Ferran Torres is one of football's great puzzles right now. He has the tools, movement, technique, work rate, but hasn't quite figured out how to assemble them into being a top-tier player, week in and week out. Some players take time to bloom. Look at Riyad Mahrez, a late bloomer who didn't become world-class until his late 20s. Could Ferran follow that path? Sure. But right now it feels like he's stuck between being an elite squad player and a player struggling to justify a starting role at one of the biggest clubs in the world. By no means is it over for him. Not by a long shot. But the next 2 years, they're make or break. Either Ferran figures out what kind of player he really is, or he risks becoming one of the almost players. You know what I mean, talented but never quite the main man. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments. Thanks for watching, like and subscribe. Goodbye.